by Ambassador Ashok Kanta sir, who is one of India's most respected diplomats and has served as the Ambassador of India to China, as Secretary East in the Ministry of External Affairs, as High Commissioner to Sri Lanka and Malaysia, and has nearly 4 decades of experience in the Indian Foreign Service. The SCB chair on IR aims to redefine the discourse surrounding the dynamic complexities of 21st century international relations. And the vision of the chair focuses on India's neighborhood and extended neighborhood relations and aims to articulate India's perspective on emerging global priorities. The chair aims to spearhead the strategic advancement of international relations studies at Chanakya University through shaping research priorities and leading high-level academic policy dialogues. So we are honored to have been joined by Ambassador Kantha sir, and we also have with us Professor Dr. Chetan Singhai sir, Dean at the School of Law, Governance and Public Policy, Chanakya University. So on behalf of the chair, I welcome all the participants to today's conversation on security versus development, reframing the debate in South Asia, where the discussion will aim to break down the complex relationship between security and development. And far from being separate domains that too often intersect, where developmental gaps can deepen security and security challenges can constrain growth. Today's discussion aims to explore how government navigates this balance in practice across defense spending, welfare priorities, and internal stability, and will also examine the impact of these choices on regional cooperation. And to discuss this, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Pratyush Sharma as our guest speaker. Dr. Pratyush is the head of research and innovation at Southern Voice and has a PhD in peace and conflict studies from the United Nations mandated University Peace at Costa Rica. Sir leads the Southern Voices research and innovation agenda and has more than 10 years of experience in policy, academia, and teaching in the field of international relations, with a focus on international development and right to development. His work centers on strengthening collaborative research across Global South and promoting innovative participatory approaches to produce timely and policy-relevant evidence. So I now welcome our speaker for today's session. Sir, we are pleased to have you here today, and thank you for agreeing to joining us. We are looking forward to hearing from you on this globally relevant and timely session and understanding more about the complex dynamics of security and development in South Asia. So thank you once again. I now request Ambassador Ashok Kanta sir to add his remarks.
Thank you, Arya. First of all, I'm delighted that we have a very distinguished guest speaker to take forward the series of webinars we have launched. Idea is that every month we'll have webinar on an important topic. And today's topic, I would not like to elaborate on it. I'll have some questions later after Pratyush has spoken. But it's a topic, which resonates very strongly when it comes to agenda of our chair. Our chair, while its mandate is ambitious, during its formative period, we propose to focus primarily on India's neighborhood. And there, of course, issues relating to peace, development, security, kind of trade-offs which are involved when we are pursuing these multiple objectives and kind of challenges we face, particularly in India's neighborhood. As you know, it's a neighborhood where India occupies a very central strategic location. We have a series of strengths in terms of synergies and natural connectivities, not only physical, but civilizational, economic, societal, that we have with our neighbors. But unfortunately, those synergies and connectivities remain underutilized. This creates a situation where our neighbors, of course, they have full agency, and increasingly we have to recognize the fact that if smaller neighbors have agency, they look beyond India. So how to position ourselves as the natural, the locus of this neighborhood, especially in South Asia, how to deal with certain security challenges which can't be wished away, but at the same time not imagine challenges. At times, we start thinking in terms of you know, hmm, something happening across borders with Nepal, open border, for instance, or, somehow people talk in a very glib and, to my mind, irresponsible fashion about a third front opening up with Bangladesh. Honestly, we have enough security challenges as it is, and we need not contribute to a complex environment by finding problems where I will not say none exist, but there are problems which are manageable. Now, with these brief remarks, let me welcome Pratyush, you to our series, and we are all looking forward to very stimulating discussion after you have made your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanta sir, for your valuable remarks. I also request now our Professor Dr. Chetan Singhai sir, Dean at the School of Law, Governance, and Public Policy at Chanakya University, to give his remarks.
Thank you, Pareha. I don't have much to add. I think I'm just looking forward to hearing Dr. Pratyush because of the critical time in which we are engaging with the neighborhood. So I'm sure knowing him very well, he will have some definitely critical insights for all of us to reflect upon. Thank you, Dr. Pratyush, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, sir. So, with the permission of our chair, let's begin with today's discussion. Post the discussion by our guest speaker, we will have an open Q&A session where the participants are requested to either orally ask their questions or they can also type in the questions in the comments box. And I request you all to keep the questions relevant to today's topic that will largely be focused on South Asia. So, over to you, Dr. Pratyush.
Thank you, Faria, and thank you, Professor Singhai, for inviting me for this monthly webinar series. The context has really been set really well by Ambassador Kanta, so that takes half of my work much easier. So before sharing my screen and starting my presentation, I would just like to share an anecdote. So during my graduate school days, being a UN university, so we had students coming to the university from all over the world. And every year, with the fresh masters intake, we used to have this small exercise that we used to do during the orientation program, where we would bring all the students together in a big hall in the middle of the room, and we would ask them a simple question: what does peace mean to you? And depending upon their answer, we would ask them to go to four corners of the room where we had already pasted four answers as to what generally peace means to different people. The first, the first corner was in that we used to paste something known as peace is absence of war. So that was one group. The second group used to be peace for them used to mean, say, for example, for some people, it would be human rights. For the other group, it would be sustainable development. For the others, it would be, equality in the society. So depending upon like this, we used to have four different answers. And we used to ask the students to choose one of the corners. The students would spread depending upon whatever they felt more comfortable with, or according to them, what peace was. They would go to four different corners of the room. And then the discussions would ensue. And in those discussions, towards the end, the realization that all students would realize was that peace is the culmination or combination of all these of all these four different things. And invariably, every year we would find students coming from war-torn countries, like during that time, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen. These were the students who would always gravitate towards that peace means absence of war. I mean, nobody can complain as to why they chose those things, because of course, the places they were coming from, this was the biggest problem that they had. For other countries, where conflict was not an immediate situation, they would invariably choose those three other options. But over a period of time, they would realize that all these four elements, or more so elements, are very much what peace means. So with this anecdote, let me start the presentation. Uh, I'll just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
All right, perfect. So security versus development. I'm glad that a question mark was there. So this gives me some liberty to discuss as to why or how development and security should be seen together. And with the South Asian debate, I would be taking a slightly different approach in my presentation. So my presentation is briefly into two parts. The first, I'm going to talk about the duality of development and security. Within that, what is the general understanding of this duality? What are the synergies and the trade-offs? And what are the integrated approaches of duality in which I'm going to include the discussions of positive peace and negative peace? And then in the second part, as in the first part, I would have already discussed, why development and security both are important. And then in the second part, I'm going to take one element from the positive peace aspect of development and security, and would be talking about the development finance and how currently in South Asia specifically, there is a huge development finance gap when it comes to the understanding of or towards realizing sustainable development goals. In that, I would be talking about the two gap theory and the three gap model. What are the structural drivers of the finance gap in South Asia? And some of the country level analysis and the LDC graduation that many countries in South Asia are graduating out of the LDC countries in coming years. So what impact is it going to have in the region as a whole? So what do we understand by duality of development and security? The duality of development and security, it recognizes that both the things are important. And they are important not separately, and they are not important sequentially. Both are deeply interconnected and mutually reinforcing. I mean, you cannot wait to achieve, complete security, and then you would want to develop a certain region or a certain country. And neither you can wait for development to have already taken place and then take care of the security. So achieving lasting development requires secure environment, while genuine long-term security is impossible without development that addresses root causes of instability. Now, what are the general understandings of this duality? One is that security is the prerequisite for development, which goes on to say that without basic safety, development is nearly impossible. Conflict, crime, or instability destroys infrastructure, deters investment, displaces population, and erodes trust. I mean, example could be, a region experiencing an armed conflict cannot maintain consistent education, healthcare, or trade. The second aspect to it, that development is the prerequisite for security. I mean, lack of opportunity, extreme poverty, inequality, weak governance can fuel grievances, extremism, and conflict over resources. Development reduces these risks. I mean, example could be, and there are lots of papers written on this, that creating jobs for young people in a fragile state reduces the appeal of joining militant groups. What are the synergies and the trade-offs? The synergy is that a risk resilient infrastructure project, say for example, a bridge built to withstand floods or attacks, delivers economic value and enhances community stability. Now, the trade-off would be funds spent on border security might come from a hospital budget. A regime's security crackdown may suppress dissent, but destroy the social trust needed for a long-term development. I mean, if you have been following the recent, the slackening of the development aid or the official development assistance by the OECD countries, you would have seen that, of course, it has reduced. And at the same time, the security-related budget of the development cooperation has increased a lot. So it is exactly this case that the financial resources have been taken away from the usual sectors of education, healthcare, agriculture, and it has been diverted towards more security related things. Now, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's a different debate altogether. But is it a wrong thing? I mean, it's almost certain that you cannot achieve one at the cost of other. Now, I know I'm very in sharing this slide on Chinese policy because there are, Ambassador Kanta himself is there and there are other Chinese experts at Chanakya University. But I'm using this example only to show how Chinese have tried to, inculcate or include both the element, the development element and the security element in their development cooperation activities. So they have articulated this duality in their national strategy, stating that development is the foundation of security and security is the condition for development. The key implications include here, they have an integrated planning in which no major developmental project like a port or a rail line is approved without a security risk assessment. And in terms of their shared security, of course, Belt and Road Initiative, it has created a lot of controversy. At the same time, it has also created a lot of infrastructure in Global South, specifically in African countries and Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So China has emphasized what they call as the dual circulation of development, where economic growth and security are both taken into account. And from their own perspective, their national rejuvenation, the goal of national rejuvenation is framed as both a development project, prosperity, and a security project, avoiding the chaos that led to, the so-called Chinese historical humiliation in the past. Now, at the same time, what are the risks of mishandling this duality? You can over securitize things and you can under securitize things. So the idea is always to somewhere have a balanced approach. And how do we navigate this duality in this balanced approach framework is to ask the right questions. The question shouldn't be what should we prioritize, development or security, but the question should be framed in a way as to, how does each decision affect the other? The second aspect is building resilience, development that strengthens society's ability to withstand shocks, be it economic, natural, or violent, serves both goals. And inclusive governance. Outsider driven security can be a threat for sure. And development that meets local need is inherently more secure. The whole idea of sustainable development goals, if we look at just from the developmental perspective, it was all about, the local needs. And that is why in the last a decade and a half, or more, I would say in the last 4 to 5 years, the discussion has been around localization of development and localization of SDGs. So if some of the students, if they want to work in the developmental field, localization is the buzzword, and it is going to continue even in the post 2030 agenda years. Now, let me include some of the aspects of negative peace and positive peace in this duality of understanding of, security and development. Integrating positive and negative peace, it enriches the duality of development and security by clarifying the quality of both security and development. Now, what do I mean by negative peace? Negative peace is, as I said in the anecdote that I was sharing, it is the absence of direct violence, that is war, terror, and physical conflict. It's about stopping the shooting, maintaining ceasefires, ensuring basic law and order. Positive peace, on the other hand, it is the absence of structural violence. And that can come in form of, reduced poverty, reduced inequality, reduced oppression, reduced injustice. So it is about building resilient, equitable institutions and addressing the root causes of conflict. I always, in my teaching days, I still remember this another anecdote from my class. Many of my students, they're from the US, and a lot of the students were African American. And in my head, the understanding of the racial divide in the US society was more in terms of, class-based division. So as just a mode of inquiry in my class, I posed this question to my students that, do you think a rich African American in the US would face less racism as compared to a poor African American in the US society? And one of the students in my class, she was an African American, and she shared this very interesting anecdote with me. She said that she comes from a rich background. Her father is a CEO of a firm, and he drives an expensive BMW. And she was telling me at least once a month, the police stops her father, thinking, how can a black man be driving such an expensive car? Because in their head, it means that it is a stolen car. Now, this is where the idea of positive peace comes into the picture. I mean, he lives in the society, he lives in the US, he's rich, but at the same time, because of so many other things, the inherent, causes of conflict, he is not being able to live his life to the fullest. So negative peace is just the absence of war, and positive peace is much more, what do I say? It is much more deep in nature. That's what I can say. Now, traditional security focuses on negative peace, that is stopping attacks, border control, counterterrorism, policing. This is the security as a condition for development. I mean, you need bare minimum of law and order to build roads and run schools. But a purely negative peace can be brittle. If security only suppresses conflict without resolving grievances, it may hold temporarily, but eventually it fails. That is why development is needed. And then when you see positive peace as development, so here it says that genuine development, like equitable economic growth, social inclusion, good governance, access to justice, it creates a positive peace in the society. It removes structural violence that can be unemployment, inequality, corruption, lack of voice. So positive peace is seen as development as the foundation for security. But development that is extractive, unequal, or environmentally destructive can actually undermine positive peace. This is where the duality warns that development without inclusion is just a new form of violence. I mean, if you see lot of people. So, I mean, a few years ago, there was this research done in which 2016, 17, 18 was a time when there were a lot of migrants coming into Europe. And when people went and interviewed these people, there were a lot of people from South Asia. And upon asking as to why are they running away from their countries, because of course at that time the countries were politically much more stable, and the reason came out to be in those focus group discussions were that they don't have jobs. Upon further askance as to what do you mean by you don't have jobs, the real culprit turned out to be climate change. Because of the drastic climate change, the agricultural land was getting reduced and reduced. This was specifically with the people coming from Bangladesh. And that led to this huge migration taking place. So, you also have to realize that development in itself is very much interconnected, and different aspects of development gets intermingled, and ultimately it leads to a conflict situation in a different part of the world. So this interconnectedness is very important both in conflict and in developmental issues. No, I've just tried to capture the integrated duality framework by having negative peace as one of the columns and positive peace as the other. And I've tried to put in the different duality elements of goal, means, relation to development, relation to security, and risk of imbalance. I'll not go in detail because most of the things I've already explained in my previous slide. And also I'm mindful of the time here. Again, the last element of this first part of the presentation is that why this integration matters. From a policy coherence perspective, I mean, just don't fund security and development separately. I mean, measure security forces on whether they enable positive peace, that is building community trust, and measure development projects on whether they reduce direct violence risks or not. Avoiding the traps. Negative peace without positive peace is a mirage. Conflict just hibernates in this situation, and it would, reappear at a different point in time. Positive peace without negative peace is impossible. I mean, you can't build schools and a running school or a running hospital in a war zone. True sustainability, the duality's end goal is not just growth plus safety, it is positive peace. A state where neither direct nor structural violence exists, and development and security are indistinguishable. I mean, I remember at one point in time where I was presenting this, people claimed that true sustainability, what I was talking about, is a utopic idea. So, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of negative aspects, or in a negative way, people see a lot of these things. In short, negative peace equals the security prerequisite for development, and positive peace equals the development outcome that makes security durable. The duality holds them together. Now, I think I'm at the end of the first part of the presentation. I would quickly move on to the second one, and if there are questions, I would take them together towards the end of it. Now, this is a paper that I'm currently working on, which is on developmental finance gap in South Asia, theoretical framework, structural challenges, and the case for a new development paradigm. And the countries that I have chosen in this my ongoing research paper is Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. Pakistan, for various reasons, was not chosen to for study, which I can't get into right now. And basic things that I was looking at this in this paper were from the aspects of SDGs, official development assistance, South-South cooperation, LDC graduation of these countries, and India's own understanding of development compact. Now, before getting into it, let's look at some of the macro figures of South Asia. I mean, of course, South Asia contains large countries with sixth of the world's population residing in the region. Its share in the world income is smaller, less than 5%, but it's increasing at a very faster pace, thanks to an average growth rate that is almost double that of the world. I mean, GDP-wise as well, as a region is the fastest growing region of the world, and it has been doing so for the last, I think, 2 to 3 years. Um, Another important aspect of South Asia is that with almost half of the population of 1.8 billion below the age of 24, South Asia will have the largest youth labor force in the world till 2040. So, there is a huge bulge in the youth population. And if not, uh, taken heed of, I mean, we have already seen how Gen Z protests in some of our neighboring countries has created a lot of havoc and a lot of political churning in these countries. So taking care of the youth is of extreme importance. South Asia's output growth, as I said, is expected to be moderate, approximately at 5.8% in 2026, which is down from 6.6% in 2025, which was driven largely by India's economic momentum. In financial year of 27, India is projected to grow at 6.6. Despite the slowdown, as I said, the region remains the fastest growing emerging market and developing economy region, with the growth outside of India projected at around 4.1% for 2026. Now, because I'm giving this talk in a university where there are students, so it is also important to talk about some of the theoretical frameworks before getting into the country-specific numbers. The finance gap basically is described by two theoretical frameworks. One is the two-gap theory, and over a period of time, the three-gap model also emerged. So in two-gap theory, it is claimed that savings investment gap and foreign exchange gap are the two major important sources of development finance gap in any country. I mean, this is not specifically to South Asia. This is in general. It is applicable everywhere. So in the saving investment gap, it was that domestic savings are insufficient to finance required investment levels. So external finance of aids, loans, grants are needed to bridge the shortfall. The second is the foreign exchange gap. In this, the export earning is inadequate to cover the essential imports, which is capital goods and technology, and which constrains the development processes directly. Now, over a period of time, it was realized that these two aspects, that is the saving investment gap and the foreign exchange gap, doesn't really cover the situation in entirety. And that is where a third aspect of fiscal gap was introduced, and then it became like a three-gap model. So in this one, with the inclusion of fiscal gap, it said that the government revenues are insufficient to cover public spending on infrastructure, health, education, and social services. And it highlighted the central role of public investment in developmental outcomes. So the rationale was that even with adequate savings and foreign exchange, the deficit remains an independent barrier requiring targeted policy response. So, what were the basic reasons as to why the transition took place from a two-gap theory to a three-gap model? So there are various reasons. I mean, there are lots of papers which have explained these three things. The transition. I'll give you what I feel are the three most important reasons for this transition. Firstly, it was always important to recognize the government's role in development. I mean, governments in developing countries and in global south, they play a crucial role in economic development through public investment in infrastructure, in education, in healthcare, agriculture, and other critical sectors. The fiscal gap specifically highlights challenges that the governments face when their revenues are insufficient to meet these expenditure needs. Now, this was not adequately addressed by the two gap theory. Secondly, it was also realized that taking a comprehensive view of the financial constraints were getting very pertinent. By adding the fiscal gap, the three gap theory provided a more holistic view of the financial constraints that can impede development. And it recognized that even if, as I said, domestic savings and foreign exchange earnings are sufficient, lack of government revenue can still be a significant barrier to growth. And thirdly, the role of public sector financing was also realized to be considered. The fiscal gap underscored the importance of effective public sector financing and management. It brings attention to the need for reforms in taxation, in public expenditure management, borrowing practices to ensure that government can fund their own developmental agendas sustainably. I mean, also, if you look at the literature in development cooperation or the foreign aid literature, colloquially as it was known back in the day, it has always said that the issue of aid or grants or loans, these are stopgap arrangements. Many scholars have called it as a band-aid solution. So in order to come away from those problems, the issue of fiscal prudence or understanding these things from a fiscal perspective is very much important, and it is mainly the government of southern countries. I mean, why southern countries? Even sustainability issues or developmental issues are there in a lot of countries of the global north as well. So government plays an increasingly important role in many of these things. And there were some other reasons as well as to why the transition took place. Also a lot of empirical studies that were coming during that time. It really made sure that the two aspects of foreign exchange reserves and the other things. It was not really it didn't really capture the entire thing, and that is why there was a need to get into the third aspect of things. Now, just looking at some of the major numbers of the global development finance gap, I mean, just if you look at, I mean, there was a McKinsey report in 2025, or yes, I think 2025. I'll share that link and it can be shared with everyone, which said that the paper wealth generated by asset price inflation in the past 2 decades have been in tune of $160 trillion. Now, if you look at this number, it's a huge number. And the annual investment gap needed for SDGs achievement is in the range of 2.5 to $4 trillion. So it clearly shows that the money is there, the finance is there, maybe the political intent to use it at the right place is not there. Again, I mean, it's an open debate. People can have a lot of different views on this. Also, at the same time, the debt generated per $1 of investment in countries of the global south led to a debt generation of 1.9 US dollars. So again, it's extremely lopsided. And and in 1970s, countries of the global north, or so-called the OECD countries, they themselves had come up with a target of 0.7% of their annual GNI would go towards official development assistance, which was foreign aid. Now, between 1970s and now, there have been just a handful of countries, and not even every year, a handful of countries in a gap of 5 to 6 years have only been able to achieve this 0.7% of GNI. I mean, so there is a shortfall in that as well. Now, some of the key structural interventions required, I mean, debt forgiveness. Countries of the global south at the United Nations General Assembly have for long talked about debt forgiveness and which was, I mean, the countries were over leveraged specifically during the pandemic spending. Domestic resource mobilization through improved and development aligned tax regimes. I mean, I remember I was in Addis Ababa in 2015 when the third Financing for Development conference was taking place. And the whole idea there was, I mean, countries of the global south went to that conference thinking that some new aspects of development finance would be open towards them. But instead, what they got was a lecturing from the global north as to how they should improve their tax regimes and how capacity building program by the northern inspectors would come to the global south and they'll teach the countries of the global south how to make their tax regimes better. So it was seen in a very negative light by countries in the global south. The third aspect is the reorientation of the private sector finances. As I said, USD 160 trillion has been the number. And reform of the global financial architecture to tackle debt distress, long-term finance, and expand the contingency financing. Now, I don't want to get into the details of North-South cooperation and South-South cooperation, but of course, North-South cooperation in a very basic way, it was what we call as foreign aid. So it was the money or the resources coming from developed countries towards developing countries. And South-South cooperation is basically developing countries amongst themselves, assisting each other towards development. I mean, and there is a whole lot of literature, whole lot of history as to how North-South cooperation has been counterproductive to the whole idea of development itself. And whereas South-South cooperation has tried to, make those things much better. But I would say in the last decade and a half, in the last 15 years, or even 2 decades, there has been somewhat of a convergence between North-South cooperation and South-South cooperation. I mean, if people are interested, I would love to share some things in the Q&A or later on. Uh, the structural drivers of finance gap, as I said, domestic resource mobilization is one of the issues. Insufficient FDI, debt burden, weak financial institutions. I mean, many countries of the global south, they suffer from weak financial institutions and trust in institutions. It has been a lot of problem in a lot of countries of the global south. Trade barriers, both tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers, have been hugely. It has had huge implications for countries of the global south. I'll get into the other slides where I'll be talking about the graduating countries of the LDCs. I mean, one of the positive aspects that LDCs had was that they used to have duty-free, quota-free access to other markets. I mean, even India provided, duty-free, quota-free access to a lot of trade taking place between Bangladesh and India. And a lot of these countries also used to export to North America and Europe. But, on one side, the tariff was reduced, but the non-tariff barriers used to, create a lot of heartburn for these exporters from LDC countries to, when they were trying to export things to Western Europe and North America. Climate vulnerability in recent years, it has, and specifically in South Asia. I mean, South Asia is among the world's most climate exposed regions. Worsening disasters, it disrupts trajectories and strain resources. I mean, imagine every year you can make schools and hospitals and bridges and roads, but in floods and in other kinds of things, everything would be washed away. So climate vulnerability is playing a very detrimental role in this aspect. Country level analysis. I mean, I won't get into a lot of details, but what is interesting in this case is the LDC graduating opportunities. I mean, Maldives in 2011, it graduated out of the LDC category. By the way, LDC category is done by the United Nations. So here, World Bank plays no role. World Bank really differentiates countries into income levels, which is high income, middle income, upper middle income, lower middle income countries. But the LDC list is done by the UN, and specifically the UN General Assembly. Bhutan graduated out of LDC in 2023, Bangladesh and Nepal in 2026. But I was just looking at some of the recent reports. I think Bangladesh has asked for much more time for this graduation. So it is not going to happen in 2026. Same goes for Nepal. And Myanmar is, as of now, it is going to graduate out of LDC category in 2027. Now, what are the opportunities for this LDC graduation? Category, there is improved credit ratings and perceived credit worthiness. So, they can take loans from the international debt market at a lower interest rate as compared to had they tried to do it when they were still in the country. In there, this because of perceived credit worthiness, there is increased in FDI inflows as market risk perception improves, and also there is a shift from aid dependency to trade and investment-led growth. But what are the risks and vulnerabilities? They lose, as I said, duty-free, quota-free market access. And as per some research, it says that Bangladesh is going to lose 8 to 10% of this of the export revenues because of losing the DFQF market access. Reduced priority of ODA. I mean, in 2022, 49% of multilateral ODAs went to LDC countries. So, I mean, imagine, there's going to be, they are going to lose a lot of ODA as well, but then it gets, somehow cancelled by the fact that an increased FDI might be able to, take care of some of the things. But again, it is not very certain in those things. And as I said, from the ODA perspective, only 4 of the 26 bilateral donors met their 0.2% GNI of ODA to LDC country benchmark in 2022, and it has again been very less. So 0.7% is the ODA to the countries of the global south, and within that 12% also, the categorization was that out of that 0.7%, 0.2% of their GNI should go to LDC countries. Now, the issue is if or could the regional development banks, the New Development Bank, Asian Infrastructure Bank, or the Asian Development Bank, they can, can they meet the downfall in terms of the ODA that is taking place? And India had, I used to work at RIS, which is a think tank of the Ministry of External Affairs. And there, since 2012, we have been working on what is known as Development Compact. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in some of his recent speeches, he has really claimed as to what Development Compact is and how this new paradigm is taking shape. So India carries out its development cooperation or South-South cooperation through the compact of these 5 pillars, if you see here. The first is trade for development. The second is capacity building. The third is technology sharing. Then there is concessional finance and grants and institutional strengthening. So this is how development compact is, and this is how India carries out its development cooperation activities. Now, conclusion and policy directions. This is a last slide. The SDG financing gap in South Asia, it far exceeds the current development flows. So a fundamental rethinking is required. Finance is a necessary but not a sufficient condition. You can have money, but still it may not be sufficient to achieve development in all its entirety. So governance, institution, technology, human capital, environmental sustainability are equally essential. LDC graduation is causing a lot of pressure, and development compact, as I've already talked about. Climate finance is again causing, it's a different take. If you see the COP summits, development finance is being discussed at a different level. And harnessing development finance to facilitate multi-level coordination is also very much important. So I'll stop here. Thank you for the patient listening. And I'll be happy to take questions or clarify some of the queries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pratyush, for this very extremely informative and detailed presentation explanation about the different security and developmental aspects that South Asia is witnessing in present times. It was our honor to listen to such deep insights and also to the interesting anecdotes that you shared with us. So we now open for the question answer session. I request the participants to raise their hands. You can unmute yourself, introduce yourselves, and then proceed with the question. Or you can also choose to type the question in the comments box. And I'll request you to keep the questions related to today's session and topic. Uh, Hello, Kanta sir.
Yeah, Farah, since people are must be typing out the questions in chat box, so let me utilize this moment to pose a couple of questions to Dr. Sharma. uh, Dr. Sharma, when we talk about security and development, uh, uh, so one trend which we are witnessing in various countries, you referred to China. China released its first national security white paper in May last year, and one of the statements contained in the paper is that security is the most important thing for a country. So this overriding importance of security. Uh, Elsewhere also we have this phenomenon of securitization of everything. So securitization of development, where everything is being looked at through prism of security. There, no, I just wanted to raise a couple of specific issues which are, attracting a lot of attention. One, this whole aspect, economic security, which has come up, where one of the main drivers of development, uh, including in countries like India and China, uh, globalization, which involved a network of interdependence. But now interdependence has been weaponized. We saw that what President Trump did. We saw what the Chinese have done. So your comments on that, that weaponization of interdependence, thereby, in a way, undermining the framework of development through globalization we had got used to. Number one. Number two, we are on the cusp of a technological revolution uh, through technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum technology, biotechnology. They are generating risks and challenges which were not foreseen earlier, and they will completely, transform both the developmental paradigm as also security, challenges to the extent that, as you're aware, Anthropic, mythos, the new model they have developed is so sensitive that they are offering it only to select clients. And even among countries, I'm told that UK has qualified, but Germany has not qualified. Of course, India is not one of the beneficiaries. How do you deal with these are challenges which are completely
I think there has been a network issue at sir's end.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. No, but I
But I think you can, yeah, take the questions. Yeah,
yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
yeah, I
proceed.
understood the crux what Ambassador Kanta was trying to say. So, I mean, in terms of economic security, I mean, it has not just been China and the US who are getting into this bandwagon of economic security in which they are trying to weaponize the cooperation and collaboration between countries, even countries like in our perception, the friendly countries like Japan. Japan's policy on economic, I mean, they have a policy paper on economic security in which very pinpointedly they explain that when it comes to mergers and acquisitions or taking in the private sector, some companies taking over the country of Japan, and I would presume that it is equally true for, I mean, of course, when we think that China, of course, does these kind of things, that they can come in between the dealings between two private companies and they can stop the mergers and acquisitions or different kinds of activities taking place if they feel that this is going to be detrimental to their own countries. So I mean these things are very much there, and I would encourage the students here to take up this study on economic security aspect, do a comparative study as to what are the commonalities or what are the differences between the economic security policy of, I mean, because when I was at RIS we were trying to do this study on comparative study between US, Germany, of course, China was there, and then Japan, because these are the 4 or 5 countries which are very much into this understanding of weaponizing their economic collaborations that they are having with other countries. And before that, we had this whole understanding of friend shoring, where they would say that, oh, Ambassador Kanta is here. So where they would.
Sir, you are
So
on
you're on
mute.
mute, I think.
Okay, okay. There was
Yeah.
power outage at my place, so yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
So, yeah, Mr. Kanta. So I was just explaining that, I mean, why just US and China? It is countries like UK and Japan also who have these policy papers on economic security. And I was, with my team, I was doing some research on this comparative aspects of, how different countries are carrying out their economic security, and they have weaponized their positioning, in the world. So, and then before that, we had this what was known as friend shoring. I mean, I'm happy that that term has started to go away now, because everybody is almost in the same bandwagon. So we had those kind of aspects as well. And in terms of technology and the new technology, Ambassador, that you were talking about, I mean, it is going to be a huge. I mean, I don't know if there is going to be. Uh, in term a regulation that is important, because if you see in this whole understanding, European Union is always more towards regulation and less of innovation. I mean, I'm talking basically in a very broad terms, and US and China on the other hand, they would be like, no, let's innovation take the front seat. We'll think about the regulations later on. India has taken a very cautious approach. I mean, in the Global AI Summit as well, the whole idea was that, again, that in terms of security and development, both are required at the same time. How do you take the balancing approach? So these are some of the things, the initial thoughts that I had in mind that I wanted to share, Ambassador.
Thank you.
So we do have another question from Preeti Bora. Preeti, you can unmute yourself and then, yeah.
Uh, Hello, good evening. First of all, what an amazing discussion around this topic, because it actually requires attention when it comes to LDC countries. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Preeti Bora. I'm a doctoral candidate from Department of Political Science, Jamia Millia Islamia, and I am working on maritime diplomacy from the small islands perspective. And this topic goes into the crux of these engagements when it comes to small islands. In the particular context of Indo-Pacific, I have noticed that geopolitical competition and development financing models influence whether these LDCs achieve sustainable development or fall into the debt trap insecurity. Particularly when they prioritize immediate stability like negative peace, and like at what cost, like positive peace. So my question is particularly related with the LDC graduation that you just have explained so well. I wanted to ask, is the current LDC graduation framework adequately capture structural vulnerabilities, or does it risk prematurely graduating, countries into a system where they face reduced support but persistent development and security risks? As Ambassador Kanta also mentioned, in the island countries perspective, there is securitization and interdependence issue. So how do we solve this particular issue? Like, how do we look at this structural vulnerabilities when it comes to the system? Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, there were lots of questions here. If I remember correctly, let me first come to the island. I mean, SIDS issue at the UN Office of the Human Rights Commission. I'll share that link later. So, I mean, it is a dual, not a dual. I mean, it's a triple problem for small island countries, and specifically if they are in the LDC country. I mean, one of the things that is very much seen is that, you know, so if you look at the LDC list, or if you look at the, uh, uh, I mean, if you combine the list of World Bank classification of countries, and on the other hand, the
Mm-hmm.
LDC categorization. Now, the problem comes up because World Bank as an institution does it from an income level perspective, the categorization of
Right.
countries, and what United Nations does is just LDC countries and non-LDC countries. They have no other categorization of countries. Now, it is very interesting to see that there are 18 high-income countries who are part of the global south, who are still developing in nature. So the island countries, say for example, of Antigua and Barbuda, or Jamaica, or Bahamas, or I mean, Panama is not an island country, but I'm just taking that example right now because these are tax havens. So on paper, they have a lot of money, but if you go to those countries, they are extremely vulnerable countries, not only just from a climate change perspective, but they have a lot of developmental issues amongst themselves, within themselves as well. Now, when these countries, they go to the international debt market for loans in terms of if they want to better their infrastructure in their countries, they are like, no, I mean, we cannot give loans to you because you're a developed country on paper. So, the interest rates are quite high. And this is where, countries like southern countries like India, China, of course, to a much greater extent, but India through its UN development what is that? One is the IPSA fund, and the other one is the UN Development Cooperation Fund. Through that, we have been able to fund a lot of projects in these countries where, I mean, all the countries that I mentioned, we have had a lot of projects there. And if you talk to the leaders, if you talk to the people and the policymakers there, they're so much like that. Oh, it was because of these countries that we have been able to rebuild our hospitals, our schools, our other social infrastructure and hardcore infrastructure things after typhoons and different climate related disasters that took place there. So that is one aspect. And in terms of LDC graduation, as you said, so there are a strict criteria. I don't exactly remember what those criteria are, but it is available on the UN website, that countries which is in the LDC category, they have to attain certain aspects of economic development, social development, and other forms of development continuously for the last, I mean, continuously for years for it to be graduate out of the LDC category. Now, but again, the danger always is, I mean, if you look at poverty related literature, the issue always is people who have come out, or the groups that have come out of the poverty, it is quite, not quite natural, I would say, but there is a tendency that they might slip back into poverty, if certain other economic aspects have not been taken care of. So it is equally true for LDC countries as well. And that is why many of the LDC countries, straight away, for 3 to 4 years, if they have been able to achieve those criteria of graduating out of LDC countries, they would ask for more time for graduation because they have this threat in their mind that what if, because of global shocks or other shocks, what if they get back into the LDC category? So that is why Bangladesh, it has asked for an extension of the time period, and many countries do that. So I mean, there are checks and balances in these kind of things. But thank you, Preeti. It was a very interesting question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Preeti, for the question. So we do have some more questions in the comments box. So should we take them one by one, or
Sure, sure. Or
I'll
if you
I'll
can
read them
combine,
out?
I mean, I don't see where the
Yes.
questions are.
So,
Okay.
so Anusha
Mhm.
has asked, how can India balance its development goals with environmental security?
I mean, it's a $1 million question. I mean, every country, not only India, most of the countries, they have this tussle. I mean, it's a very interesting study. I think it was Darun Esimoglu and others. They talked about the sustainability trilemma. If I remember correctly, it was basically that they were trying to talk about reduced inequality, economic growth, and environmental sustainability. These are the three aspects that no country has been able to achieve in the recent past. And if any country is able to crack this code as to how they can achieve these three things together, they'll be a role model for the entire world. So the sustainability trilemma is something very interesting because, as I said, development in itself is such a interconnected thing that if you if you try and tweak one thing, its impact is going to be seen on the other side. Sustainability trilemma. I don't know. Study these things and see how India or the world will be able to achieve these things.
Thank you, sir. So we have another question by Mohammad Imtiaz. Says, we see in recent times constraints between South Asian nations themselves, such as India and Bangladesh, that pose questions about South-South cooperation and the idea of development, such as for people in the Indo-Bangladesh borderland. How do you navigate the people on borderland through the lens of development or the need for securitization?
Uh, it is very interesting question. I mean, if you look at Indian Army has a lot of developmental oriented initiatives at the border districts, and they invite a lot of development experts to. I mean, if you see, I mean, if you're not into it, you would realize why is army interested in development work. But army does a lot of developmental work in the border districts, not only on the Bangladesh side, but on other border areas as well. So, in terms of it, it is important to get into get into the nerve and see where it can be taken place. Border districts are extremely important. Again, we were doing some research on this aspect before this whole unraveling of the Bangladesh situation of the Sheikh Hasina episode. Before that, in fact, a team from RIS, we were planning to go to the border districts and carry out the research, basically in terms of the development compact. My last slide that I was talking about, that is it only trade, or is it capacity building, or is it technology sharing, or is it also some grants or the loans that we have provided. And see, I mean, as Ambassador Kanta in his initial remark also claimed that uh, the countries in South Asia, they have had issues with each other. They continue to have issues. They will continue to have issues with each other. The issue is, how do we manage these kind of things? I mean, even in this scenario, I mean, with the Strait of Hormuz and all those things taking place, India was giving out, I don't know, was it LPG or petrol, I think, to Sri Lanka and to Bangladesh, because we have had some understandings back in the days in which we help our neighboring countries with this. I still remember in Bhutan, the LPG crisis almost led to the election of a prime minister of Bhutan who was more pro-India. So these kind of things, it does take place in our neighborhood as well. And energy security is going to play a very, very important role. I mean, I remember back some years ago, even in Nepal, the blockages of the border, it created a lot of furor. So I mean, these things need to be balanced. It needs to be managed, I would say.
Right, so. We have another question by Arun. Could you please unmute yourself and then proceed with the question?
Yeah, thank you for hello, Dr. Pratyush Sharma. Thank you. This was a interesting presentation, very important as well. My name is Arun Manoharan. I'm an associate professor at Suffolk University in Boston. So I wanted to ask, you touched upon a lot of areas. I wanted to ask you about tourism, right? The security concerns, how do they affect like tourism flows? Do you see that playing into tourism sustainable development? Also, probably it's got to do with some of the just the concerns from the colonial past also, right? So that is one question. Second is you did mention about the North-South collaboration, the convergence. So if you could share some examples, that will be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun. Very, very interesting question. I mean, in
Dr.
terms of
Pratyush, sorry to intervene. Sorry to intervene. I just wanted to introduce Professor Aaron because he has been a friend of School of Law, Governance, Public Policy. He has also visited us. So apparently this morning when I shared with him, he has joined. So thanks, Aaron, for joining. But from US.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chetan. Yeah, I'm just listening to it on the way to work. So thank you again for the invite. Yes.
oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. Uh, so yeah, in terms of tourism, again, I mean, see, tourism can very well be seen as a form of people-to-people connect, but at the same time, it is also economic opportunity or it can be seen from the economic security lens as well. I mean, there have been countries like China. Whenever the issue between China and South Korea it flares up, the Chinese government stops its people or to travel to some of the South Korean beach areas. So tourism has been weaponized in a lot of ways. I mean, recently I was just watching some of the aspects in terms of it was I think Philippines and I think it was China and South Korea, because I think China also has border disputes with Philippines, and they were doing exactly the same thing, stopping Chinese people to travel to beautiful beaches of Philippines. So economic security and tourism is very much linked. And sorry, what was the second? Acha, the convergence of North South and South South. I mean, see, it's not as if that North South cooperation never had any positive aspects to it, and all aspects of South South cooperation were perfectly fine. I mean, there were goods and bads in both the systems. Uh, it was basically the political aspects of conditionality, which was a major problem or major bone of contention in North-South cooperation. I mean, the whole idea of tide aid and all the aid money getting back to the provider country itself. Those were a lot of had a lot of issues, and this is where South-South cooperation emerged over the years. Okay, and then in the major countries of the global south, they were like, okay, what we have suffered because of foreign aid politics, we'll make sure that we don't do exactly the same things. But in certain aspects, some countries, they have been following on a very similar trajectory. So those things have taken place. So convergence, I would say, have been more in terms of like the demand driven aspect of South South cooperation. The North South cooperation realized that it is very important. Otherwise, the taxpayers' money in the global north is going to foreign aid, but then it is not doing its intended purposes. So demand-driven aspect is one thing that has gone very much into the lexicon and the grammar of North-South cooperation, and it went from South-South cooperation. And also in terms of the effectiveness of development cooperation, it has started to come in South-South cooperation, and it has mainly come from the effectiveness debate that foreign aid was having for a lot of these years. And there are a lot of other aspects as well.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much,
Thank you.
Arun sir, for a very interesting question. Dr. Pratyush, we have two more questions in the comment section, although I think we have exceeded the time limit. So should I proceed with those two questions, if we could quickly take them up, or do we wrap up here?
We can quickly take two.
Okay, sir, Priyanka Chuk says the discussion was very enriching. Can you please address how does China's role as a development financer influence this SDG financing gap in South Asia, and what implications does this have for regional security?
So no one country can solve the SDG financing gap in any part of the world. I mean, it has to be a global approach. I mean, if you just look at SDG 17, which is on global partnership, it never talks about any one country or one region being able to fulfill the financing gap of any region. So it can play a role in South Asia. I'm not sure because again, in South Asia, uh, politics trumps a lot of these things. So also trust deficit, and there are so many things. So trust building exercises needs to take place. I mean, I still remember during the BRI when India was asked to attend one of the meetings. I mean, we declined because and for obvious reasons, for well placed reasons. Oh no, I think it was the AIIB, the launch of AIIB. So yeah, China is going to play uh, good role, positive role, mixed role in different parts of the world. So I don't have any specific answer or a very pinpointed answer for this.
Right, sir. Thank you. So just the last question for today's session we'll take. Sivani says, with regard to the positive piece aspect of your talk, I would like to know more about how policy may be inclusive of intersectional nuances.
See, policy making is not a linear process. It's not just that if you keep providing the inputs and the output would be a very good policy. Policy making, and specifically at Southern Voice, what we have been trying to do is co-creation of different things. Just conceptualizing any policy at the conceptualization phase itself, just when the idea of certain things is taking place, it needs to be done in a very inclusive and in a multi-stakeholder format. And by this, I mean having different kinds of people coming together. You know, it's not just economists coming up with with some policies. That team itself needs to be very inclusive, and it needs to have the people for whom these policies are being made. Inclusion of those people in the policy making aspects is very important. I mean, be it security, be it development, it needs to have this co-creation understanding of things. And just one little aspect that I just want to add here. In Southern Voice, we have realized that if Southern countries, they keep complaining all the time that development cooperation or lack of development cooperation is the reason why we are not developing. And global North countries would keep on saying that, okay, we have been giving you financial resources for all these years, so why haven't you developed? So there are issues on both sides. So as a neutral person, sometimes it is very important to bring these two strands together and make them talk to each other. Now, what is happening a lot is we are talking a lot about South-South cooperation. We are doing a lot of South-South dialogues, but somehow I feel, and this is my personal feeling, that not enough North-South dialogues are taking place when it comes to development. I mean, every year, just at the HLPF in UN, all countries come together and they talk about SDGs and others. That's it. It has to be a constant and a consistent effort where all parties are coming together and discussing about global development. Thank you.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. I think it's been a very informative and engaging question answer session as well. So with this, we end the session here today. Kantha, sir, would you like to have any closing remarks?
No, Farah, you go ahead. You.
So thank you very much, Dr. Pratyush, firstly for accepting our invite and for this extremely engaging and highly informative discussion today. And it's on a very relevant and timely topic. I'm sure it's a gain for all of us today. And thank you, Ambassador Kantha, sir, and Professor Dr. Chetan, sir, for your presence and valuable insights. And thank you to all the participants for joining us today. And we look forward to your participation in our upcoming sessions as well. So we end the session here. Chetan, sir, you want to make any closing remarks?
Thank you. That's it.
Okay.
It was excellent. Thank you, Pratyush.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Pratyush. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Master.
Bye-bye.